Hello everyone, my name is Scalti, and welcome back to our Satisfactory Let's Play. Ultimately, in this episode, I've come to the conclusion that we need to up our arsenal. We're getting to the point where certain parts of the map that we should or need to explore are fairly defended by the local hostile fauna, and opted to make a home for our weapons factory here in the Blue Crater. And in addition to that, we're also going to be making 50 circuit boards per minute using the electrode circuit board alternate recipe. There's a couple of reasons why that's valuable and why I'm opting to do that. First and foremost, the byproduct of the electrode circuit board recipe is an excess of heavy oil residue, which is what we need to make smokeless black powder, which is then what we need to actually make ammunition. So here's the electrode circuit board. It's rubber and petroleum coke making circuit boards, as we've seen when we put up a little factory to ship it up to our crystal oscillators to make crystal computers. So the result of this alternate recipe, though, like I mentioned, is we have extra heavy oil residue just based on the amount of petroleum coke that we have. We could always overproduce petroleum coke, but in this instance, why not just take that heavy oil residue, mix it with black powder, and make our smokeless powder? Ultimately, we can't see what it's used in because I haven't made any yet. So as we build the factory, we'll actually unlock the items here in the MAM, but first we'll be able to make the rifle and then also the rifle ammo, and then we'll also be able to make the cluster novelisks. And then once those are all sorted out, we'll actually then be able to unlock what I believe will be our last major dimension upgrade for our inventory. And then potentially, it does give us access to turbo fuel, but that does require the aluminum casing and then also the packaged turbo fuel itself. Before formally actually starting up and building the factory, there was something I wanted to take advantage of, which is the geothermal generator. So unlocking that in the MAM after manually crafting some of the prerequisite components, went ahead and got that unlocked because we do have this node here to access for power, and based on us having the hover pack, having some localized power in which to use the hover pack without having to actually run the power itself would be super convenient. So ultimately though, this machine is freaking cool. I love the sound profile of it, that just like quick succession noise that it makes. Really slick. I really like this machine a lot in terms of its overall design. And one of the first things that I noticed and recalled is the fact that the power delivery is ever fluctuating. It's got a minimum and a maximum. So in terms of how that's going to affect our power grid and the numbers in it becoming not a flat, continuous amount of energy, is neither here nor there. Just having this localized power for use with the hover pack was very fortunate for us to have access to. Alright, we have our first floor placed, and overall the system to make electrode circuit boards is wonderful. I think it's a really strong alt recipe for that. I think it's probably the best from the standpoint of the simplicity of the logistics of it. So we have 10 refineries over on the right making our rubber. Then we have 4 on the back left making the petroleum coke, and then the remainder are making our smokeless powder. Initially I was curious as to why I was having some type of shortage of oil coming into the system despite having the secondary pipe going across to the other end just to try and help make things loop and run smoothly. But our refinery here in the middle was cut short a little bit, which I ended up resolving a little later on. So the ones here making the smokeless powder, I manually fed the black powder. We're currently not yet automating that, but this was just to get the, like I said, smokeless powder built, so that way we can go into the MAM and unlock things. And then down below here, we just have our rubber coming through and what would be our petroleum coke coming down the center. For whatever reason it wasn't showing up. But then here we have our storage container with the smokeless powder. A little tangent I go into, so essentially displaying what the spine of the factory will be in a similar sense of what we did in our battery factory. And then I also kind of hinted at it'd be kind of cool to do a peek through of the actual production floor into the sandwich layer in a similar sense of having essentially a horizontal status window instead of a vertical one, where the belts that are exposed are clean, and you can see the specific intended product moving through the factory. Overall though, main objective here is to unlock the rifle and ammunition. So got that unlocked, that feels pretty good. And then the clustered Nobelisk, needing 200 Nobelisks itself, opted to just do a little bit of a crafting, manual crafting session after this, just to make sure that we had all of our recipes for the factory unlocked. But because we also have the means, went ahead and unlocked our 6 additional inventory slots, and was kind of going through trying to figure out, okay, where's the last 3? And in hindsight, I'm pretty confident the last 3 come from a milestone unlock in the hub. I could be wrong though. After getting everything unlocked in the MAM that we needed to for the moment, went ahead and finalized our black powder production. Well, I didn't finalize it, but I built our black powder production and have that coming over on the belting into our factory now. And I had a little bit of a math flub when going through all of this. Essentially, I was short 1 refinery here that we can see I overclocked. And this is just to kind of make up that difference and allow us to maintain a symmetrical layout of our machines. But then everything else, just kind of going over the numbers and the ratios and everything of kind of how we got everything configured. And everything seems to be running smoothly. We are overproducing our black powder for the moment. We do need the black powder base for our Nobelisks, but the smokeless powder does require it. So we just have the black powder being made at the intended amount that we're going to need. It does have an awesome sink near the factory and where it's being produced over on the horizon there, just so that way everything kind of keeps running. It's standard operating procedure at this point for that. Next up though, went ahead and unlocked the cluster Nobelisk. Like I said, wanted to do some manual crafting so that way we can get that unlocked. I can look at the recipe, but then the other component is I wanted to craft up the rifle. Couldn't help myself. Went over to the crash site that had plenty of fauna defending it, just to kind of check out the rifle and see what it's all about, and having a good bit of fun with it. The 15 rounds per magazine is a little low, at least from what I'm used to. I'm technically, for what it's worth, a Counter-Strike veteran. I haven't played the game in quite some time, but based on the familiarity with firing weapons in a game, that's kind of like the closest recollection I have to it. But yeah, it's not too bad. I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, and it does allow us to take out some hostiles that would otherwise want us to meet our grim end from afar. Having the second floor built out, try to be as compact as possible within reason, and ended up using an array system for most of the machines up here, just for simplicity's sake, especially with having the Mark V logistics unlocked. It's a pretty reasonable solution or input method at this point. So we have 20 smelters off in the distance, all making our iron ingots, and that's being fed into 2 separate lines of 100. We did load balance the constructors just because it's a simple 1-to-3 split, and then all of the output from that is heading off into the assemblers at the very front of the factory. And then we have our black powder coming up from the floor below in the sandwich layer, being fed up, and that's making our our nobelisks. And then the output of the nobelisks is heading over to these assemblers here. And then we have our smokeless powder coming up from the back of the factory, and then joining everything together. Here I was kind of going through and with the realization of like figuring out, okay, how do we want to store our nobelisks and our cluster nobelisks without anything backing up, and maintaining proper throughput so that way the entire factory doesn't back up. Ultimately what I'm working on here is not the final solution. I ended up needing to do a little bit of some clever overflow systems just to make sure that our refineries, especially with trying to like deal with the heavy oil residue and the output of the circuit boards, making sure that that throughput remains the same. I had to come up with a little bit more of a more involved solution. One of the things I stopped to do is kind of think about, okay, we have 2 alternative rifle types. We have the homing rifle ammo, and then we also have the turbo rifle ammo, and just kind of was initially talking through the thought process of, okay, do we want to take the ammunition being made here and send that out on a drone to where the high-speed connectors and the packaged turbo fuel and the aluminum casing is, or do we want to do the inverse and actually bring those alternative items to this factory to then make that alternative rifle type or rifle ammo type? Overall, haven't really locked in that solution quite yet, but just was, trying to do what I can to think ahead, just because we're about to start the 3rd floor, and that's where we're going to have our drone ports that would be delivering the circuit boards out. But then we also need to take into consideration the fuel coming in, how that's all going to kind of work out, and just trying to plan ahead so that way any type of rework in the future to allow us to make the alternative ammunition types would be relatively low impact and simple to do. To that point though, the realization that I kind of came to here is the fact that we have extra plastic being produced up at our turbo fuel plant. So we potentially could take the extra plastic, make some empty containers, and then sloop some of the refineries making the turbo fuel, send that into a packager, and then send that into a drone port, and then we can send that fuel here, 1, to be used for the turbo rifle ammo, but then 2, we can actually use it to fuel the other drone port that's sending out our circuit boards. What I'm doing here is I've figured out how to, well, I kind of flubbed it initially, but came to the realization of how I need to kind of create the overflow system for everything so that way nothing has like the risk of backing up, or at the very least making sure that the entirety of our heavy oil residue is constantly being used to produce the smokeless black powder. So what we have here is we have the output from our nobelisks that's going into our merger, which goes down to the bottom of the factory. You could also see the ammunition coming down there. And then what we're doing here is we are prioritizing the smokeless powder to go make our cluster nobelisks. Then the overflow heads to the left into the other splitter. That splitter then prioritizes going up the lift to make our ammunition. And then if our ammunition were to ever back up, the right output of that smart splitter will then send it into the overflow back down into our awesome sinks. That way, like I said, the system does not back up. In a similar sense, we have the output for our circuit boards. So the output is being merged together and prioritized into our drone port. And then that drone port output be going up to where we are making our computers, or where we will be making our supercomputers, and then the overflow will meet up with where our ammunition comes out, and then this will all go down the factory into the awesome sink. But at this point, all we have left to do is put in the second drone port and put in the polish. So at this point, we are pretty much build complete. All right, build is complete. Look how great it is. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so build is complete though. We have our nice geothermal generators over there producing some glorious natural power for us. Maybe it's not glorious, maybe it's the devil. Renewable clean energy is the devil, so those aren't great. But we need energy, so we're gonna use it. We have our sulfur coming over into our little outpost factory here, making our black powder, along with the coal coming in from yonder. And then just above our coal, we have our smelters and constructors making our copper sheets. We have a measly amount for such a high throughput belt. Looks a little silly. I think I might slow it down to a Mark 1. Just to kind of make it look a little nicer. Make it look a little more full, if you will. It does feel a little light and silly, but you know, and I was contemplating, you know, do we just bring it into the factory itself and create those pieces? But I do kind of like how that's arranged, and from afar, looking at how all of this kind of comes together in a build is pretty cool. Is it going to look great when maybe we need to tap some of the resources in here, like these coal nodes or this limestone node, etc.? Is it going to look messy once we do that? If we're going to have logistics kind of going everywhere to and from, I'm not sure. We'll figure that out when we get there, but I think for the most part, we're probably not even going to need any of those resources. Maybe. It depends on how grandiose I want to go, you know, outside of maybe the nitrogen, which I'm assuming is nitrogen over there. But all that comes together in what I'm currently standing on. So let's go ahead and get a relatively normal POV or FOV. Go for a little launch here to our little friendly fungal tree. Capture this autosave, get a little boost for free. Nice. And there it is. So maintaining the same motif or kind of design style that we did for our aluminum factory here, with how we have the foundations curving around and whatnot, and the glass walls in their entirety from floor to ceiling, which is really nice. I did get rid of the white concrete beams on this build, as you can see. I do have all of the glass wrapping at the front except for the ceiling, and I think that's just, I'm okay with that because of how much kind of personality the top floor has, with how we have the drone ports, which we will take a look at in a moment. But let's go ahead and start from the ground and work our way up. So we'll just hitch a ride on our black powder belt. Pivot. Non-OSHA approved walkway. So we have a little, little side entrance here to gain access into the build. Out back, we have our awesome sink, just in a simple little miner housing to get us what we need in terms of just getting rid of the excess. Doesn't need anything overly fancy. We might actually have enough room below the entire factory to actually tuck that away. And if I find that we do, I'll probably end up doing that instead of having it stick out the back here. But I did feel it was kind of nice just to kind of give the back a little bit of dimension, because it's overall really flat besides the opening we have at the top, which we'll take a look at here momentarily. Heading in though, we have our back hall with some nice ambient ground effect lighting. This is just a standard billboard that's clipping through the foundation to illuminate this back hallway. I was initially using 2x2 meter signs up on the ceiling, but they don't actually cast any emission light, which is super unfortunate. So I opted for this approach, and based on, you know, what we did in the aluminum factory, because we have the half pipe foundations here, the way I would like to set it up, the back of the billboards stick through, which is not something I'm particularly keen on. Overall, we have our status window here, just to make sure everything's working as intended. You know, I technically could probably use these lights as the ground effect solution, be a little less resource intensive, but it is what it is. Heading back in though, I actually need to pop the HUD on so we can use our elevator. So we got production level 1, ground. We'll go down just one floor. I'm not sure about how this kind of looks. It's a little goofy down here. But
yeah, we're not going to really be down here too much. I'm okay with it for the purposes of kind of what we got going on for right now. Eventually, you know, I would like to in the future factories kind of be a little bit more methodical, and this is kind of a learning opportunity to do so. And if we do end up actually using those smaller billboards, then this wouldn't actually be a problem. But I felt like this was going to be the most immediate, easy solution to take care of. So we got our service sandwich level A. Then we also have B down below. Actually, I need to switch these. I think they're SLA, SLB, and then like this is A and B. Actually, I can just switch that literally right now. So we got production level 2 SLB. Confirm, close. So we saw production level 1. Let's go to production level 2. This is a fully enclosed, for the most part, elevator. There is some weird flashing against the foundations here, which is kind of weird, but same little ambient lighting. Got our basic floor here, so we got all of our assemblers making the knobelisks, cluster knobelisks, and iron ingots for the iron pipes in the back to actually be made into our boom sticks. And then we have, again, simple production window here. The smokeless powder, I don't think is supposed to be backing up like that, but it's not a problem based on what we saw from the first floor. Everything's copacetic. We're in good shape. Head up to production level 3. You know, logistic floors aren't all that snazzy to look at and examine, and nothing critical there. Still, like, so like this is like that square 2 by 2 meter sign. Doesn't really cast. I would like to say that it doesn't cast light, especially not down here, and not nearly as much as the billboards do. But I have it here just because of how small this space is, and to try and run that similar lighting solution wouldn't quite work. But this is the one floor where the exit is on this side, because the hallway can't cut through this feature here. This kind of looks like a face now that I'm looking at it. This is like the eyes here, and then this is like the mouth or something, and this is like its tongue. I don't know. Anyway, stairs coming up, and this is just kind of like a viewing window at nothing. Although when the sun does set, it's really pretty. The color cast overall of this is really cool. I'm not sure why I have this here. I was thinking about putting in the equipment workshop in some way, shape, or form, but it just visually doesn't fit the vibe overall. If I had infinite nudge, I could get it to work. Like one of the things, just like a rough demonstration. So place the workshop, and then using nudge, I can bring it down so that way it doesn't at least stick all the way up. But it does still look a little goofy in my opinion. I have had it set up before where it's enclosed on this line here all the way around, and then if you walk through here, it leads to like a little personal storage area that uses these personal storage boxes, and I had these arranged on like what looked like shelves, and I had like power slugs in them and power shards and flower petals back when those were still a thing. But I didn't want just an empty wall, and we don't really have anything going up or out, so I just have this here, and subject to change, who knows. Over here we have our ammunition being made. Over here we have our circuit boards being made, 50 per minute. We have these windows throughout. We do have this column here just to kind of bring a little bit more visual interest at this floor. And then we also have a door out to the exterior where we have 2 drone ports. So we have the drone port here, which is the intake for the fuel that will come from a drone at our factory over here. And then this one is what will be transporting the circuit boards up to the computer factory once we eventually build it over here. But yeah, so I like the little cutout that we have on the floor rather than this just all being like an interior floor and then we have the drone ports on top. Being able to kind of add this segmentation or multi-use floor I thought was really cool. Kind of how we have all of that working overall. So yeah, I think this build came out really great. The exterior walls here, I'm not a huge fan of with how I designed the factory. I'm going to go back to having the 1/2 meter foundations on the exterior, so that way I don't need to use an inner corner and then an outer corner to get the soft edge like we have here. I mean, it works, it's okay, but some of the placement's really annoying, just because in certain circumstance we had to use the 2 meter inner corner, and this is the one that has that snapping, that vertical snapping offset, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it is what it is. And then we obviously cleaned up our oil coming over, our 300 oil per minute. So, but this is the build, and I do want to note, we don't need 250 rifle ammo per minute, because one, we can't fire that much ammo per minute. We can't even upload that much per minute. But in hindsight, the thing that kind of works about it, and I took the opportunity real quick to take a look at the homing ammo for the bullet guidance system, so we can look at what the recipes are for this, and then I'm going to unlock the turbo rifle ammo, which is a little different, but this produces 25 per minute. The thinking is we could potentially either bring high-speed connectors to this factory, make a light modification above the floor where the ammo is actually being made. So we could maybe do a floor on top of this that has a drone port to receive the ammo, and then, receive the high-speed connectors, and then we can make the homing ammo and potentially do the same thing with turbo fuel or turbo rifle ammo, or vice versa. We have a drone that actually takes the rifle ammo away, and we produce it elsewhere. Because what I'd like to do is I would like to have the extra, like I said, extra plastic being made at our turbo fuel facility, along with the extra turbo fuel we'll get from a slooped refinery making it, and actually, upload some packaged turbo fuel, and then sink what we don't use, and then drone some of that and maybe bring it here. So overall, really, like I said, really pleased with this turnout. I do understand that some of the numbers don't make sense in terms of the quantities being produced per minute. But also in hindsight, I didn't know at the time of making the math and the plan for this, how much rifle ammo we would actually be able to utilize. But there you have it.
Well, for those who stuck around after the very end of that little B-roll, I made an addition. I added a drone port on the back end here. That empty space, I added a manufacturer. This is actually producing turbo rifle ammo. So I spent a little bit of time working on the turbo fuel facility. So I over at turbo fuel plant, I slooped 2 refineries making turbo fuel, and over there we have a packager making packaged turbo fuel, making 37.5 per minute. We need 15 per minute to actually make the ammunition. So the excess gets sent in as fuel from that port. So that drone going from the turbo fuel facility to here is being run off of the excess packaged turbo fuel, and then any excess after that gets uploaded for my personal usage for the jetpack. And then the aluminum casing, we took 40 for our control units, and that leaves us 20 left over from what that factory was making. So we're taking 15 of that and bringing it here to the to make the turbo rifle ammo. So we have that online. So this makes better use of our ammunition excess, because this was, making 250 rifle ammo per minute was a little silly, versus the amount that we can fire out of our rifle using turbo fuel ammo. So let me actually grab some of this out. You know, 'cause this thing is awesome. You know, the spread is a little insane. But we definitely can use this ammo a little more. You know, a little faster than regular ammo. Which is pretty great. So I wanted to take a little extra time and kind of get that sorted out. And it took a minute to understand the drone ports. So like actually this no longer needs to be here. Shouldn't be anything coming in here. Everything should be coming in at the other drone port now. Because initially I had it delivered here thinking the delivery is separate from outgoing, or incoming is separate from outgoing, but when a drone drops something off for incoming, it picks up the outgoing and takes it out. So that was something I learned, and that's why I added the third drone port on the back end that is transporting. So I thought it was a nice little tasteful inclusion of the drone port overall. And then the manufacturer occupying the space I thought worked. The logistics is a little silly. So we have our rifle ammo coming off of our overflow output. We have our packaged turbo fuel coming in. That's just going to back up because that'll eventually back up at the turbo fuel facility, and then that will just get synced. And then our aluminum casing just comes in from the port, and then our output for our packaged, or for our turbo rifle ammo, will overflow and then merge into our rifle ammo output, and then that overflow kicks down, and then this oh wait a second. Oh yeah, okay, so then any overflow from here, so like this is the or the regular rifle ammo, then the turbo rifle ammo will go out of the factory once it backs up, just like that. So everything should be able to remain working correctly. Our maximum output of this factory should not be exceeded with our Mark 5 belt as the output. So we should be all right. But yeah, just wanted to kind of share that inclusion. Last little minute addition. I would like to eventually make our homing rifle ammo as well. Once we start making our high-speed connectors, there is an option to possibly bring quick wire and cable here, or actually we can make cable over here because we have excess copper to be utilized. And then we could always bring our K-Tyrium over, but I think the smarter play is to actually bring over the high-speed connectors and just make those elsewhere and then potentially bring those back. So like maybe, I don't know if it would work correctly, but our input, or sorry, our circuit boards going out could also be our high-speed connectors coming in, because it's a 1-to-1 ratio. It's one circuit board per high-speed connector, so that's always potentially an option as well. So yeah, ultimately gonna wrap it up here, and I think it's a fairly elegant-ish solution overall.